Chapter 1. The Jolly Preparation. Subchapter 1. Santa's Workshop Buzz. It was a crisp and snow-covered morning at the North Pole, and Mrs. Claus had already begun her day, bustling with excitement and energy. She was a woman of remarkable charm and elegance, yet her heart was devoted to one mission: ensuring that every child around the world experienced the magic of Christmas. This was a day like no other, for it marked the beginning of the most anticipated season of the year. Mrs. Claus, a figure often overshadowed by her famous husband, Santa, played an essential role in the operation of the North Pole's bustling workshop. As the sun painted the horizon with hues of pink and gold, she stood at the heart of the workshop, overseeing the joyful army of busy elves who worked tirelessly to craft toys of all shapes and sizes. The sound of hammers, giggles, and soft Christmas carols filled the air, creating an atmosphere of warmth and creativity that was truly magical. For years, she had been the unsung hero of Christmas, ensuring that Santa's sleigh was well-stocked and ready for its global journey. Her meticulous organizational skills and boundless compassion were what kept the wheels of Santa's operation turning smoothly. But this year, there was an additional reason for her excitement. It was a secret she had been guarding for months, and now the time had come to unveil it. As she moved through the workshop, Mrs. Claus exchanged smiles and warm greetings with the dedicated elves, who were working with unmatched enthusiasm. Their pointy ears and rosy cheeks beamed with the anticipation of another wonderful holiday season. They worked with precision and love, knowing that each toy they crafted would bring a smile to a child's face. At the heart of the workshop, there was a new invention, carefully concealed under a red velvet curtain. Mrs. Claus approached it with a sparkle in her eyes, her fingers itching to reveal its magic to the world. She gestured to a nearby elf, and with a dramatic flourish, the curtain was drawn aside, unveiling the marvelous creation that she had kept a secret for so long. It was a toy-making machine unlike anything the North Pole had ever seen. An ingenious contraption of gears, levers, and whimsical, twinkling lights, it promised to revolutionize toy production. This invention was the result of countless hours of tinkering, brainstorming, and innovation. Mrs. Claus had enlisted the help of the brightest minds among the elves, and their collective creativity had birthed this wonder. This year, the goal was simple but profound: to bring extra joy to children all over the world. Mrs. Claus believed that this invention had the power to do just that. With this machine, the North Pole's workforce could produce more toys with the same level of care and craftsmanship. It would ensure that no child, no matter where they were, would be left without a gift on Christmas morning. Mrs. Claus couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and anticipation as she watched the elves marvel at the new invention. Their eyes widened, and they exchanged excited whispers. It was a moment that encapsulated the essence of the North Pole: the spirit of innovation, boundless generosity, and the magic of Christmas. As she stood there, basking in the glow of her secret's revelation, Mrs. Claus knew that this year would be truly extraordinary. With the workshop buzzing with enthusiasm and the promise of this groundbreaking invention, the stage was set for another enchanting Christmas season. Her heart swelled with anticipation, for she was determined to make this year the most memorable one yet, ensuring that every child's dream would come true. And so, the journey into the heart of Christmas magic had begun, and Mrs. Claus was at the forefront, ready to spread the joy of the season far and wide. Subchapter 2. Mrs. Claus's To-Do List. As the news of the marvelous toy-making invention spread like wildfire through the North Pole's workshop, Mrs. Claus found herself standing in the heart of her bustling domain, her eyes shifting between the eager elves and the remarkable contraption that held the promise of an extraordinary Christmas. The joyous hubbub in the workshop was infectious, but she couldn't let it distract her from her extensive to-do list. Mrs. Claus's responsibilities went far beyond her role as Santa's partner and the guardian of the North Pole. She was the unsung hero of the holiday season, the one who made sure that the machinery of Christmas ran like clockwork. Her to-do list was legendary, and this year it seemed longer than ever. There were so many tasks, each of them crucial to the success of Christmas Eve. The first item on her list was to check Santa's naughty and nice list. With a heart full of warmth, she headed to the office where Santa diligently kept the records of every child's behavior throughout the year. This sacred document was filled with names, each one accompanied by a note, meticulously outlining the deeds and misdeeds of boys and girls across the globe. Mrs. Claus knew that Santa, despite his jovial demeanor, took this list very seriously. He believed in the innate goodness of children, and it was her responsibility to ensure that his faith was well placed. She read through the list, her spectacles perched on her nose, making notes and adjustments as needed to guarantee that no child was overlooked or misjudged. With the list carefully reviewed, Mrs. Claus moved on to her next task, inspecting the reindeer. She wanted to ensure that they were in peak form for the big night. She knew each reindeer by name and nature, their preferences and quirks. She visited their cozy stables, speaking to each one in soft tones, brushing their fur, and checking their harnesses. The reindeer, in turn, nuzzled her affectionately, their eyes sparkling with anticipation for their grand annual journey. As she worked her way through the list, the North Pole's enchanting workshop remained abuzz with activity. Elves darted to and fro, skillfully crafting toys with newfound enthusiasm, inspired by the potential of the new toy-making machine. The air was filled with the delightful aroma of freshly baked cookies and the sound of carols sung by the elf choir, adding to the festive atmosphere. However, as Mrs. Claus was focused on her tasks, she encountered a mischievous young elf named Spark, who was known for his boundless curiosity. Spark had a knack for getting into playful trouble, and today was no exception. While attempting to help with Mrs. Claus's tasks, he stumbled upon a pot of magic snowflakes that were used for decorating the workshop's Christmas tree. In his eagerness, Spark accidentally tipped the pot over, sending a cascade of glittering snowflakes into the air. The delicate flakes danced in the workshop's golden glow, spiraling and twirling in a magical display of light and beauty. Laughter and gasps filled the air as the elves stopped their work to marvel at the impromptu snowstorm. Mrs. Claus couldn't help but smile at the enchanting spectacle, realizing that sometimes a bit of unexpected magic could be just the thing to brighten up the workshop. She joined in the playful festivities, scooping up handfuls of magic snowflakes and tossing them into the air. The workshop was transformed into a winter wonderland, and for a moment, the stress of her to-do list was forgotten. As she reveled in the joy of the snowstorm, Mrs. Claus knew that no matter how long her list grew, the magic of Christmas would always find a way to make everything a little more enchanting. With Spark's mischievous help, she continued her tasks with renewed energy, knowing that every checkmark brought them one step closer to the most magical night of the year. Subchapter 3. Meeting with the Elves. Mrs. Claus had a heart as warm as the North Pole was cold. It was this very warmth that drew the elves to her. And as the magic snowflakes continued to twirl and dance around the workshop, she gathered them all for a special meeting. The atmosphere was charged with excitement, but Mrs. Claus knew that to ensure the success of Christmas, the heart of the North Pole's operation needed not just machinery, but a soul, a spirit that could inspire and uplift. With her characteristic grace, Mrs. Claus stood at the front of the workshop, her eyes glistening with kindness and enthusiasm. The elves, huddled around in eager anticipation, knew that when Mrs. Claus spoke, her words had the power to light up their hearts and fill them with purpose. "Dear elves," she began, her voice a soothing melody that carried to every corner of the workshop. "Today we celebrate the spirit of preparation and giving. But beyond the hustle and bustle of this workshop, there is a world of children who look to us with hope, the same hope that has made Christmas the most magical time of the year." Mrs. Claus's eyes shone with a story waiting to be told, a story that held the power to awaken the elves' sense of purpose. She began to speak of a young girl named Lily, who lived in a small, snow-covered village far from the North Pole. Lily's family had very little, and the thought of receiving Christmas presents was an unimaginable luxury. As Mrs. Claus shared Lily's story, the elves listened with rapt attention. They could feel the warmth and compassion in her words, and their hearts swelled with empathy for this young girl who had so little. Lily's story was a reminder of the magic of Christmas, a magic that wasn't just about the presents, but about the love and joy that filled the air. Mrs. Claus continued. Lily's eyes would light up with wonder as she saw the snowfall on Christmas Eve. It was the only gift she had ever known. But one year, as she gazed out of her frosted window, she saw something extraordinary. A gift, wrapped with love and care, had appeared on her doorstep. It was her first Christmas gift, and it came from a place of kindness she could never have imagined. The elves, now completely captivated by the story, could see the importance of their work. Lily's story was a testament to the power of their craft. The toys they crafted weren't just playthings. They were the embodiment of love and joy, the very essence of Christmas. Mrs. Claus continued. It was that small, simple gift that changed Lily's life. It wasn't about the cost or grandeur. It was about the love and magic it held. And so, dear elves, every toy you create has the potential to bring that same magic into a child's life, to light up their world and fill it with warmth and wonder. A silence hung in the workshop as Mrs. Claus's words sank in, and then, one by one, the elves began to nod in understanding. Their eyes shone with renewed purpose and determination. Mrs. Claus had touched their hearts, reminding them that their work was not just a task, but a mission to create happiness and magic. With her speech, Mrs. Claus had reignited the spark of creativity and enthusiasm in the workshop. The elves returned to their workstations with a newfound energy, crafting toys with even more love and care, understanding that each toy they created was a little piece of magic that would find its way into the heart of a child like Lily. The workshop buzzed with a sense of purpose as the magic snowflakes continued to twirl in the air, reflecting the enchanting spirit of Christmas that filled every corner of the North Pole. Mrs. Claus had once again shown that the true magic of Christmas was not just in the gifts, but in the love, warmth, and joy that accompanied them. With her words, she had rekindled the magic, ensuring that this Christmas would be the most extraordinary one yet. Chapter 2. The Magic of the North Pole. Subchapter 1. The Enchanted Forest. After her inspiring meeting with the elves, Mrs. Claus decided to take a moment to herself and wandered towards one of the North Pole's most cherished secrets, the Enchanted Forest. It was a place where the magic of Christmas flowed through every tree, where talking animals and luminous fireflies made their home, and where dreams took shape in the most wondrous ways. As she entered the forest, the atmosphere seemed to change, becoming an ethereal and mystical world, far removed from the busy workshop and to-do lists. The air was filled with the gentle hum of fireflies and the soft laughter of hidden creatures. The trees glistened with delicate icicles, and the snow underfoot seemed to twinkle like a blanket of stars. Mrs. Claus walked further into the forest, her heart filled with a sense of wonder. The enchanted forest was her place of solace, where she could connect with the very essence of Christmas. She listened to the enchanting melodies of the wind rustling through the pine trees, as if they were singing carols just for her. As she strolled deeper into the forest, she encountered a wise old owl perched high in the branches of an ancient oak tree. The owl's eyes gleamed with wisdom, and its feathers shone with an otherworldly luminescence. Mrs. Claus couldn't help but be drawn to the majestic creature. "Good evening, dear Mrs. Claus." The owl greeted her with a voice like a soft, melodic whisper. "What brings you to the heart of the enchanted forest today?" Mrs. Claus smiled warmly, her eyes reflecting the magic of the place. "I come seeking solace and wisdom, my dear friend." The preparations for Christmas are in full swing, and while it's a time of joy and giving, it can be quite overwhelming. The owl nodded in understanding, its eyes reflecting empathy. The magic of Christmas is a powerful force indeed. But remember, dear Mrs. Claus, that in the midst of all the busyness, it's important to take a moment to connect with the true essence of the season. For it is in the simplicity and wonder of Christmas that its real magic lies. Mrs. Claus listened intently, for she knew that the wisdom of the enchanted forest was boundless. "Tell me, wise friend, what can I learn from the magic of this place today?" The owl spoke with a gentle, yet profound tone. The enchanted forest thrives on the power of hope and belief. The animals here, the fireflies, the trees, and even the stars, they all believe in the magic of Christmas. Their unwavering belief fuels the enchantment of this place. Mrs. Claus nodded, understanding the significance of these words. Hope and belief, she mused. They are the very foundations of Christmas, aren't they? The owl blinked slowly, a sign of agreement. Indeed, in every child's heart, there is a seed of hope, a belief that Christmas is a time of wonder and joy. Your role, dear Mrs. Claus, is to nurture that hope, to make their belief in the magic of Christmas bloom and flourish. Mrs. Claus felt a profound sense of purpose wash over her. The wisdom of the owl had reminded her of the true magic of Christmas, the power of belief that could transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. She knew that her role was not just to oversee the workshop, but to nurture the spirit of Christmas itself. With a heart full of gratitude, she bid farewell to the wise old owl and continued her stroll through the enchanted forest. The magic of the place enveloped her, reaffirming her commitment to spreading the joy and wonder of Christmas to every corner of the world. The enchanted forest had once again bestowed upon her the gift of inspiration, reinforcing the belief that the magic of Christmas was not just in the North Pole, but in every heart that held on to the hope and belief in the extraordinary. Subchapter 2. The Talking Reindeer. Mrs. Claus's journey through the enchanted forest had filled her heart with the spirit of Christmas, but she knew there was one more magical encounter to be had on this extraordinary day. It was time to visit the reindeer, her loyal companions, and the living embodiment of the North Pole's magic. Walking through the snowy woods, she made her way to the reindeer stables, where the magnificent creatures were housed. Each reindeer had a name and a unique personality, but Mrs. Claus had a particular fondness for one in particular, Rudolph. With his glowing red nose, he was the most special of them all, and it was his uniqueness that made him her favorite. As she entered the stables, the reindeer turned their heads to greet her, their eyes filled with warmth and recognition. Mrs. Claus felt a sense of belonging among these magnificent creatures, and she made her way to Rudolph, who was standing apart from the others, his nose shining with a soft, comforting light. "Hello, Rudolph," she said with a smile as she approached him. "How are you today?" Rudolph's eyes sparkled as he looked at Mrs. Claus, and he nudged her gently with his nose. "I'm well, thank you, Mrs. Claus. It's always a pleasure to see you." She patted his soft fur and looked into his eyes, curious about the story of his glowing red nose. "Rudolph, you've always been so special, and I've often wondered how you came to have such a unique and wonderful nose. Would you mind sharing your story with me?" Rudolph nodded and began his tale. "It all started when I was just a young reindeer. I was born with a red nose, and as you can imagine, it made me stand out among the others. At first, I felt different and I thought my red nose was a burden. I tried to hide it, but no matter what I did, it always glowed, especially on cold, wintry nights." Mrs. Claus listened with rapt attention, knowing that Rudolph's story held a valuable lesson. Rudolph continued, "One foggy Christmas Eve, when Santa needed a reindeer to guide his sleigh, my unique red nose turned out to be a blessing. Its bright glow pierced through the thick fog, lighting the way for Santa and the other reindeer. It was then that I realized that being unique is something to be celebrated, not hidden." Mrs. Claus smiled and nodded in understanding. "Rudolph, your story is a beautiful reminder that our differences are what make us special. It's our uniqueness that adds magic to our lives and to the world." Rudolph's nose beamed with pride as he finished his tale. "I've learned that being true to oneself is the greatest gift of all. Embracing our uniqueness can lead to extraordinary things, just as it did on that fateful Christmas Eve." Mrs. Claus embraced Rudolph with a warm hug, knowing that his story was a gift in itself. As she left the stables, she carried with her a heartwarming reminder that the North Pole was a place of acceptance, love, and celebration of the extraordinary. The magic of the North Pole, she realized, wasn't just in the enchanting surroundings or the busy workshop. It was in the hearts of those who lived there, both human and magical creatures alike. And with Rudolph's story in her heart, Mrs. Claus knew that she had yet another lesson to share with the world, one that celebrated the beauty of being unique and the power of embracing one's true self. Subchapter 3. The Snow Globe Observatory. After her heartwarming encounter with Rudolph, Mrs. Claus made her way to the Snow Globe Observatory, a place of magic and wonder that allowed her to peer into the lives of children all around the world. Here, within the sparkling confines of snow globe-like encasements, she could observe the moments of kindness, love, and joy that define the spirit of Christmas, irrespective of cultural or geographical boundaries. As she entered the observatory, a sense of anticipation washed over her. The observatory was a place where the universal kindness of children was on full display, and each snow globe represented a different corner of the globe. She approached the first snow globe, which contained a scene from Australia. Inside, a young boy, no older than 10, was helping an injured kangaroo. His face was filled with compassion as he carefully tended to the wounded animal, offering it a bowl of water and some nourishing food. Mrs. Claus watched in awe as the boy's kind-heartedness shone through. Moving on to the next snow globe, she found herself in Japan. There, a little girl with a smile as bright as the sun was leaving a heartfelt note for Santa Claus beside a plate of cookies. The note was adorned with beautiful drawings and words of gratitude. Mrs. Claus's heart swelled with emotion at the simplicity and sincerity of the gesture. With each snow globe she visited, she saw countless moments of children from different parts of the world engaging in acts of kindness and love. In Russia, children were helping their grandparents decorate a Christmas tree. In Nigeria, a group of youngsters was gathering to sing carols for a group of elders. In Canada, a child was building a snowman with their friends and then sharing warm cocoa. Mrs. Claus knew that these heartwarming scenes were not isolated incidents, but rather a reflection of the universal kindness and love that Christmas inspired. It was a testament to the fact that, no matter where they lived or what language they spoke, children were bound by a common thread of generosity and compassion. With a sense of gratitude and admiration, Mrs. Claus made her way through the observatory, witnessing the beautiful moments of goodwill that children from all corners of the world shared. The observatory was a constant reminder that the magic of Christmas was a language of love and kindness that transcended borders and cultures. As she left the observatory, her heart was brimming with hope and joy. The story she had seen through the snow globes reaffirmed her belief in the enduring magic of Christmas, the magic that was nurtured by the hearts of children who, in their own unique ways, shared love and kindness during the holiday season. With these touching moments in her heart, Mrs. Claus knew that her role at the North Pole was not just about preparing for Christmas, but also about celebrating the goodness in every child and sharing the magic of their kindness with the world. The North Pole was indeed a place where the enchantment of Christmas was not confined to one location, but spread its warmth across the entire world. Chapter 3. Mrs. Claus takes the lead. Subchapter 1. Santa's Annual Departure. Christmas Eve had arrived, and the North Pole was abuzz with excitement and anticipation. The enchanting atmosphere was palpable as elves scurried to load Santa's sleigh with gifts. The reindeer stood ready, and the workshop was a whirlwind of activity. Santa, in his red suit and rosy cheeks, stood at the helm of his sleigh, ready to embark on his annual journey around the world. His hearty laugh and warm smile filled the air as he gave his farewell hugs to Mrs. Claus and the elves. "Take good care of everything, my love," Santa said, his eyes twinkling with merriment. "I'll be back before you know it. Because of the increased number of gifts to deliver, I will have to make several quick return trips to restock and zoom off to continue the delivery, because every child will get a gift this season, thanks to your great invention." Mrs. Claus smiled and hugged Santa tightly, her heart filled with love and pride. "Have a safe and magical journey, dear. And remember, I'll be here to keep the North Pole running smoothly while you're away." With a wave and a hearty ho ho ho, Santa's sleigh took off, disappearing into the snowy night sky. The North Pole momentarily fell into a hush, the only sound being the distant jingling of sleigh bells that grew fainter and fainter. Now, it was Mrs. Claus's time to shine. With Santa away, She had taken on the role of the North Pole's temporary leader. The workshop, the reindeer, and the delivery schedules all fell under her watchful eye. It was a responsibility she had embraced with grace and competence for many years. But this time, there was an unexpected twist. A powerful snowstorm had begun to brew on the horizon. The snowstorm, unlike any they had seen in years, was rapidly moving toward the North Pole, threatening to disrupt the carefully planned schedule for Santa's return. Mrs. Claus knew that she had to act swiftly and decisively to ensure that everything ran smoothly in Santa's absence. She gathered the elves and, with a determined spirit, outlined a plan to manage the situation. The workshop needed to continue producing toys, the reindeer had to be sheltered from the storm, and the Christmas gifts had to be organized and prepared for Santa's return. Mrs. Claus, with the help of the elves, directed the efforts, making sure that each task was carried out efficiently and effectively. The North Pole was a whirlwind of activity, with the elves working tirelessly to complete their tasks despite the approaching storm. Mrs. Claus, ever the symbol of strength and grace, moved among the workers, offering encouragement and support. Her soothing presence calmed the worried hearts of the elves, and they continued their work with renewed determination. As the snowstorm drew closer, Mrs. Claus made her way to the reindeer stables. She knew that sheltering the reindeer was of paramount importance, as they were not only Santa's trusted companions, but also an essential part of the North Pole's magic. With the help of the stable elves, she ensured that the reindeer were safe, warm, and comfortable in their stables. The snowstorm, however, grew fiercer by the minute, making the situation increasingly challenging. Mrs. Claus, with a mixture of hope and determination, watched the snow fall, knowing that Santa's return was at risk. The challenge was formidable, but Mrs. Claus was a symbol of resilience and leadership. She had always been the silent strength behind the North Pole's enchantment, and now, in Santa's absence, she was proving herself as its capable and resourceful leader. As the snowstorm raged on, Mrs. Claus's unwavering dedication to keeping the North Pole's magic alive became even more evident. She was determined to ensure that Santa's return would be met with an organized workshop, well-cared-for reindeer, and more gifts ready for delivery. The North Pole, under her guidance, would stand strong and united, even in the face of unexpected challenges. Subchapter 2. Managing the North Pole. As the snowstorm continued to bear down on the North Pole, Mrs. Claus knew that she had to take decisive action to manage the North Pole and its many responsibilities in Santa's absence. With a heart full of determination and a mind filled with resourcefulness, she rallied her team of dedicated elves, each one eager to uphold the magic of Christmas. Gathering the elves in the workshop, Mrs. Claus addressed them with a warm but resolute tone. "My dear friends, we find ourselves facing an unexpected challenge, but together we shall overcome it. We are the keepers of Christmas, and we will ensure that the spirit of the season continues to shine brightly. Let us stand strong and united." With a sense of purpose, Mrs. Claus worked closely with the elves to devise new ways to meet the increasing demand for toys. The snowstorm had disrupted production schedules, and time was running out. Mrs. Claus, ever the innovative thinker, introduced a new toy production technique that combined the speed of the newly invented machine with the craftsmanship of the elves. This ingenious blend of technology and handcrafting allowed them to produce toys at an unprecedented pace without compromising their quality. The workshop hummed with activity as the elves adapted to the new method, each one bringing their unique skills to the process. Mrs. Claus worked side by side with them, rolling up her sleeves and demonstrating her unwavering commitment to the task at hand. It was a testament to her leadership, resilience, and hands-on approach that inspired the elves to work with even greater enthusiasm. As the toys began to pile up, ready to be loaded on a Santa's sleigh upon his return, Mrs. Claus couldn't help but feel a deep sense of accomplishment. The North Pole's magic was preserved, its traditions upheld, and the children of the world would wake up to a Christmas filled with joy and wonder. But Mrs. Claus didn't stop there. She knew that to keep the elves' spirits high during the challenging times, they needed a dose of magic and festivity. With the snowstorm still raging outside, she organized an enchanting winter festival right in the heart of the North Pole. The festival featured twinkling lights, a giant Christmas tree, and an array of games and treats. Mrs. Claus's vision for the festival was to remind the elves of the beauty of the holiday season and to create a sense of togetherness and joy. The elves, usually engrossed in their work, took a break to enjoy the festivities. They played games, sang carols, and shared stories of Christmases past. The atmosphere was filled with laughter and warmth, as the North Pole family grew even closer in the face of adversity. The Winter Festival was not only a morale booster for the elves, but also a testament to Mrs. Claus's resourcefulness and her ability to lead in times of challenge. It showcased her understanding of the importance of celebrating the spirit of Christmas, even when faced with difficulties. As the festival came to a close, the snowstorm outside began to abate. Mrs. Claus looked out at the tranquil, snowy landscape and knew that she had successfully managed the North Pole during Santa's absence. The North Pole's magic had been preserved, and she had proven herself to be not just a supportive partner to Santa, but a capable and resourceful leader in her own right. With a sense of accomplishment, she prepared for Santa's return, knowing that the North Pole's magic would shine brightly for yet another Christmas, thanks to her unwavering determination and leadership. Subchapter 3. Consultation with Christmas Council. As Mrs. Claus continued to manage the North Pole with determination and grace during Santa's absence, she realized the importance of seeking guidance from wise and experienced sources. It was during this challenging time that she decided to consult with the Christmas Council, a group of holiday legends who, like her, had faced their own unique challenges in making their respective holidays special. The Christmas Council consisted of legends like the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, and the Leprechaun, each one representing their own holiday. Mrs. Claus knew that their collective wisdom and unique experiences could provide valuable insights to help her navigate the unexpected challenges that the North Pole was currently facing. She sent word to the council, inviting them to a meeting at the North Pole where they could share their stories and offer guidance. It wasn't long before the holiday legends gathered, each one bringing their own distinctive charm and magic to the North Pole. The Easter Bunny, with his basket of colorful eggs, arrived first, his furry ears twitching with curiosity. The Tooth Fairy followed, her shimmering wings leaving a trail of stardust. The Leprechaun, with a mischievous twinkle in his eye, joined the group, his pot of gold glistening with enchantment. They all gathered in a cozy and festive room in the North Pole, a place where the magic of the holidays seemed to come alive. Mrs. Claus welcomed her guests with warmth and gratitude. "Thank you for coming, my dear friends. The North Pole is facing an unexpected challenge, and I believe your wisdom can help us overcome it. Each of you has faced unique obstacles in your holiday roles, and I would be honored to hear your stories and insights." The Easter Bunny, with a friendly hop, began his tale. Easter, much like Christmas, is a time of joy and celebration. But there have been years when I faced challenges in delivering eggs. Once, a rainstorm threatened to soak all my beautifully painted eggs, but I found a way to protect them. I learned that sometimes it's about adapting and finding creative solutions. The Tooth Fairy, her voice like the tinkling of bells, shared her own story. In my role, I've had to deal with children losing teeth in unexpected places, like under pillows or even in the woods. It taught me the importance of patience and persistence, of always finding a way to bring comfort and joy. The Leprechaun, known for his cleverness, added, "In my journeys, I've encountered tricky situations where I had to outsmart those who sought my pot of gold. I've learned that wit and resourcefulness can overcome challenges, and that in the end, the pursuit of happiness is what truly matters." As each legend shared their stories and insights, Mrs. Claus felt a sense of camaraderie and wisdom in the room. The challenges they had faced were as unique as the holidays they represented, but the principles of determination, adaptability, and the pursuit of happiness were common threads that connected their experiences. Mrs. Claus listened attentively, absorbing their wisdom like a sponge. She realized that, like her fellow holiday legends, she too possessed the strength and resilience to overcome the challenges the North Pole was facing. The support and guidance of the Christmas Council were invaluable, and she knew that she could count on their continued friendship. As the meeting concluded, the Christmas Council departed, leaving behind a sense of unity and shared purpose. Mrs. Claus felt empowered and inspired, ready to face the remaining tasks and challenges in Santa's absence. With the wisdom and camaraderie of the Christmas Council by her side, Mrs. Claus knew that she could continue to lead the North Pole with grace and determination, preserving the magic of Christmas for children all around the world, no matter what obstacles came her way. Chapter 4. A Sleigh Full of Challenges. Subchapter 1. Missing Present Predicament. As Mrs. Claus continued to manage the North Pole with a steady hand and a heart full of determination, she received an unexpected distress call that sent ripples of concern through the entire North Pole. It was from an elf named Jingles, who had accidentally misplaced a sack of presents intended for a distant land. Mrs. Claus's heart went out to the distraught elf, and she knew she had to take immediate action. The lost presents were a crucial part of the holiday preparations, and she couldn't let any child be disappointed on Christmas morning. She gathered a small group of trusty elves and set out on a thrilling quest through the snowy North Pole to recover the lost gifts. The North Pole, though familiar to her, was a vast and unpredictable place, filled with enchantment and whimsy at every turn. Their journey led them through icy forests, where talking snowmen greeted them with a frosty welcome and shared riddles that led the way. Mrs. Claus, always quick on her feet, solved the snowmen's riddles, earning their assistance in the quest. Next, they encountered a mischievous group of polar bears who were known for their playful antics. The bears were enchanted with a childlike curiosity, and they reveled in hiding and seeking presents, making the search more challenging. Mrs. Claus and her team had to engage in friendly negotiations with the polar bears, promising to leave them extra honey treats in exchange for their help in finding the lost presents. Their journey took them through frozen rivers, where the elusive ice sprites danced in the moonlight, leaving a trail of sparkling snowflakes that led the way. Mrs. Claus couldn't help but admire the beauty and grace of these magical creatures, and she made a silent wish for their assistance. Finally, after days of searching, Mrs. Claus and her team stumbled upon the missing sack of presents, hidden in a cave deep within the snowy mountains. The moment of discovery was met with cheers and a sense of relief that washed over the group. The presents had been found, and Christmas was saved. As they made their way back to the North Pole, the journey had been an adventure filled with challenges, whimsical encounters, and a deeper appreciation for the enchanting world of the North Pole. Mrs. Claus knew that this quest had not only recovered the lost gifts, but also reinforced the magic and wonder of Christmas in her heart. Upon their return to the North Pole, Mrs. Claus ensured that the recovered presents were carefully wrapped and ready for delivery that Christmas Eve. The North Pole was once again abuzz with excitement and anticipation, and Mrs. Claus knew that her role in managing the challenges that had come her way had strengthened her bond with the North Pole and its enchanting inhabitants. The missing present predicament had been resolved, and Christmas would go on as planned. Mrs. Claus, ever the resilient and resourceful leader, was ready to face any other challenges that lay ahead, ensuring that the magic of Christmas would shine brightly for children all around the world. Subchapter 2. The Naughty List Mystery. As Christmas season continued, Mrs. Claus continued her duties at the North Pole with diligence, ensuring that all preparations were on track for the demand for more night of gift-giving. Among her responsibilities was the annual task of reviewing the Naughty and Nice list, a task that she took very seriously. It was during one of these routine checks that she noticed a young boy named Timmy's name on the naughty list. Mrs. Claus was known for her kind and compassionate nature, and she couldn't help but feel a tug at her heart. She had always believed in the power of redemption and second chances, and her curiosity was piqued. What had led Timmy, a young boy, to be listed as naughty? Determined to uncover the truth, Mrs. Claus set out on an investigation. She delved into the extensive records of Timmy's behavior over the past year and discovered that, indeed, there had been instances of misbehavior. But as she dug deeper, she also found a remarkable story of redemption and selflessness that had not been taken into account. Timmy, a spirited and adventurous child, had initially found himself on the naughty list for some mischievous pranks and disobeying his parents. However, what the records didn't reveal was the transformative journey he had undertaken over the past few months. As Mrs. Claus continued to investigate, she learned that Timmy had taken it upon himself to befriend a lonely, elderly neighbor who lived next door. The neighbor had recently lost her spouse, and her days had grown increasingly lonely and desolate. Timmy's heart had been moved by her plight, and he began to visit her regularly, running errands, shoveling her walkway in the winter, and keeping her company. What touched Mrs. Claus deeply was the selfless act of kindness that Timmy had shown during the holiday season. He had used his allowance to purchase a warm coat and a thoughtful Christmas gift for his elderly neighbor, knowing that the gesture would bring her joy and warmth during the cold winter months. Realizing the profound change in Timmy's behavior, Mrs. Claus knew that his actions were deserving of recognition and redemption. She called upon the Christmas Council, the group of holiday legends she had consulted earlier, to discuss Timmy's case and seek their wisdom. The Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, and the Leprechaun, who had shared their own tales of challenges and redemption, listened to the story of Timmy's transformation with keen interest. They agreed that Timmy's act of kindness was an embodiment of the spirit of Christmas, a testament to the power of change and goodness that the holiday represented. With their unanimous support, Mrs. Claus made the decision to carry out a more detailed investigation towards moving Timmy's name from the naughty list to the nice list, ensuring that he would receive a gift from Santa that Christmas Eve. Timmy's story was a reminder to Mrs. Claus of the importance of recognizing and celebrating the capacity for change and growth in every child's heart. She knew that it was her duty to uphold the values of kindness, understanding, and compassion during the holiday season. With Timmy's name warming up to join the nice list, Mrs. Claus was determined to not only solve the naughty list mystery, but also to reinforce the belief in the magic of redemption, to remind all that, in the spirit of Christmas, second chances were always possible, and the power of kindness could transform even the naughtiest of hearts. Subchapter 3. Blizzard at the North Pole. On that Christmas Eve, the North Pole had been bustling with activity, but a new challenge emerged that tested the limits of Mrs. Claus's leadership and resourcefulness. A powerful blizzard had swept across the region, threatening to disrupt the carefully laid plans and preparations for Santa's return. The relentless snowfall blanketed the North Pole in a thick layer of snow and ice, making it nearly impossible for the elves to continue their work in the workshop. The reindeer were confined to their stables, and the delivery schedules were in disarray. Mrs. Claus knew that Santa's safe return was in jeopardy, and she couldn't let that happen. With a determined spirit, Mrs. Claus decided to take matters into her own hands. She braved the biting cold and gusty winds to assess the situation. The blizzard raged on, its ferocity unmatched, but Mrs. Claus was resolute. She remembered the tales of an ancient, mystical artifact known as the Snowflake Scepter. It was said to have the power to calm even the most violent snowstorms. With the memory of Timmy's redemption and the wisdom of the Christmas Council in her heart, she knew that the Snowflake Scepter might hold the key to solving this crisis. Mrs. Claus embarked on a treacherous journey to find the Snowflake Scepter. The path was treacherous, with snowdrifts and freezing temperatures, but her determination pushed her forward. She knew that the magic of Christmas was worth the effort, and she couldn't let the blizzard extinguish its light. Deep within the enchanted forest, where the wisest of creatures dwelled, Mrs. Claus encountered a mystical owl. She shared her purpose and her quest for the Snowflake Scepter with the owl, who, with a knowing look in its eyes, agreed to guide her to the artifact. As they continued their journey, the blizzard raged on, becoming more intense with each step. Mrs. Claus and the wise owl reached a hidden glen, where the Snowflake Scepter was said to be hidden. The scepter was adorned with delicate, glowing snowflakes, each one radiating an otherworldly beauty. Mrs. Claus reached for the Snowflake Scepter, her fingers trembling with anticipation. She knew that her courage and determination were her strongest allies. With the scepter in her grasp, she lifted it high and called upon its magic. A wave of energy emanated from the Snowflake Scepter, and as Mrs. Claus directed its power toward the raging blizzard, a miracle unfolded. The snowflakes that fell from the sky transformed from chaotic and destructive to delicate and harmonious. The blizzard began to calm, the wind subsided, and the snowflakes danced gently to the ground, creating a peaceful, wintry scene. The North Pole was enveloped in a tranquil beauty, and Mrs. Claus's heart swelled with pride. She had tamed the blizzard, not through force, but through the power of her determination, her unwavering commitment to the magic of Christmas, and the assistance of the mystical snowflake scepter. With the blizzard quelled, the North Pole returned to its usual state of enchantment and merriment. Mrs. Claus had ensured Santa's safe return, and she had once again demonstrated that, in the face of adversity, her courage and determination were unshakable. As she made her way back to the North Pole, the snowflake scepter in her hand, Mrs. Claus knew that she had faced one of her greatest challenges yet, and she had emerged victorious. She also knew that the magic of Christmas was not just about enchanting moments, but also about the strength of character and the unwavering commitment to spreading joy and love to all corners of the world. With the blizzard conquered and Santa's return secured, Mrs. Claus could look forward to a continued peaceful Christmas Eve with renewed determination and the knowledge that, as a leader, she was capable of handling even the most daunting of challenges. Chapter 5. Mrs. Claus's Heroic Journey. Subchapter 1. Quest for the Perfect Present. As the day continued on that Christmas Eve, Mrs. Claus found herself pondering over the perfect gift for Santa. She had always been the keeper of the North Pole's magic and the guardian of Christmas traditions, but this year, she felt a deep desire to surprise Santa with a gift that would truly warm his heart. With her characteristic determination, Mrs. Claus decided to embark on a special mission to find that perfect present. Her journey led her on an adventure that took her deep into the heart of the North Pole, where the land was blanketed in a pristine layer of snow and the air was filled with the scent of pine trees. Her journey was solitary, and the snow crunching under her boots was the only sound that accompanied her. Yet, Mrs. Claus was filled with a sense of purpose and anticipation. She had heard whispers of an elusive group known as the Gift Gnomes, creatures who held the secret to the true meaning of giving. As she ventured deeper into the snowy wilderness, Mrs. Claus began to notice curious signs, small, sparkling footprints in the snow and the faint echoes of laughter in the crisp air. The Gift Gnomes, it seemed, were leading her toward their hidden realm. She soon found herself in a quaint and magical village nestled amid the snowy landscape. The village was adorned with twinkling lights and the cheerful chatter of the Gift Gnomes. They were small, lively creatures, dressed in vibrant red and green, and they greeted Mrs. Claus with joyous laughter. The Gift Gnomes, it turned out, were the true guardians of the spirit of giving. They explained to Mrs. Claus that the act of giving, of sharing one's love and kindness, was the most precious gift of all. They shared stories of how they worked tirelessly throughout the year to create handmade gifts and surprises for the children of the world, gifts that brought smiles and warmth to their hearts. Mrs. Claus was moved by their tales and the sincerity with which they gave. She realized that the true magic of giving was not in the grandness of the gift itself, but in the love, thought, and care that accompanied it. It was a lesson she knew she could share with Santa and the world. The Gift Gnomes, sensing Mrs. Claus's intentions, presented her with a special, handcrafted ornament made from the purest ice and adorned with delicate snowflakes. It was a symbol of their appreciation for her visit and a reminder of the true spirit of giving. With the ornament in her hand, Mrs. Claus thanked the Gift Gnomes for their wisdom and friendship. She left the magical village with a heart filled with inspiration, knowing that the perfect gift for Santa wasn't something she could buy, but something she could create from her heart. As she returned to the North Pole, Mrs. Claus felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that her gift for Santa would be a reflection of the love and thoughtfulness that had filled her journey to the heart of the North Pole. It was a reminder that, in the true spirit of Christmas, it was the love and the kindness behind the gift that mattered most. With the wisdom of the Gift Gnomes and the spirit of giving in her heart, Mrs. Claus was ready to create a gift for Santa that would warm his heart and strengthen the bond that had kept them together for countless Christmases. The heroic journey to find the perfect present had led her to a deeper understanding of the magic of Christmas, one that transcended material gifts and touched the very soul of the holiday season. Subchapter 2. Unmasking the Naughty List Culprit. Mrs. Claus had returned from her inspiring journey to the heart of the North Pole with a heartwarming lesson in the true spirit of giving. However, she couldn't forget about Timmy, the young boy who had found himself wrongly placed on the naughty list. Determined to set things right, Mrs. Claus continued her investigation into Timmy's inclusion on the naughty list. She reviewed the records once more and discovered an important detail that had been overlooked: a case of mistaken identity. As she delved deeper into the records, Mrs. Claus realized that there were two boys named Timmy in the same town, and it was the other Timmy who had been responsible for the initial misbehavior. The confusion had led to the wrong Timmy being placed on the naughty list, and this was an injustice that needed to be corrected. With her newfound insight, Mrs. Claus set out to find the other Timmy and gather the evidence needed to prove the innocence of the Timmy who had shown such kindness to his elderly neighbor. It was a quest that required her to call upon her friends in the enchanted forest and the gift gnomes she had met during her journey. The mystical creatures of the North Pole were more than willing to help Mrs. Claus in her mission to right a great wrong. The wise old owl from the enchanted forest, the snowmen with their riddles, and the polar bears with their playful antics all joined forces to provide clues and guidance. With their assistance, Mrs. Claus was able to locate the other Timmy, who confessed to his past misdeeds and set the record straight. He admitted to his pranks and explained that he had learned valuable lessons and had since decided to mend his ways. The evidence was gathered, and Mrs. Claus had the testimonies of the mystical creatures and the sincere confession from the other Timmy. With this information in hand, she knew it was time to present the case to the Christmas Council and set the wheels in motion to clear Timmy's name from the naughty list. Mrs. Claus called upon the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, and the Leprechaun once more and explained the situation. They listened attentively, and their collective wisdom led to a unanimous decision to right the wrong. Timmy's name was removed from the naughty list, and he was placed on the nice list, ensuring that he would receive a gift from Santa that Christmas Eve. It was a moment of justice and redemption that filled Mrs. Claus with immense satisfaction. She had proved that, in the face of an injustice, her commitment to fairness and her determination to set things right were unwavering. Timmy, the young boy who had been wrongly accused, would wake up on Christmas morning to find his name on the nice list. And it was all thanks to Mrs. Claus's heroic efforts and the support of her friends in the North Pole. The magic of Christmas had once again triumphed over adversity, and Mrs. Claus's journey to correct the naughty list mistake had reinforced the values of fairness, understanding, and compassion that lay at the heart of the holiday season. Subchapter 3. Confronting the Snow Queen. Mrs. Claus had proven her resilience and resourcefulness in the face of numerous challenges during her time leading the North Pole. However, her greatest trial lay ahead as she confronted the enigmatic and formidable Snow Queen, who had been responsible for the powerful blizzard and other troubles that had tested the North Pole's resilience. The Snow Queen, a majestic and regal figure, resided deep within the frozen heart of the North Pole. She was known for her icy demeanor and her ability to manipulate the weather with a flick of her hand. Her displeasure with the world outside had caused the blizzard and disrupted the Christmas preparations. Mrs. Claus, filled with a sense of duty and compassion, embarked on a perilous journey to confront the Snow Queen. She knew that the only way to bring peace to the North Pole and ensure a continued smooth Christmas Eve was to convince the Snow Queen to change her ways. As Mrs. Claus ventured deeper into the icy landscapes, she encountered the Snow Queen's magical ice sculptures, guardians of her realm. These sculptures were imposing and forbidding, but Mrs. Claus's determination and the lessons she had learned from her previous adventures gave her the strength to press on. After a challenging journey, Mrs. Claus finally reached the Snow Queen's palace, a magnificent structure made entirely of ice and glistening with an otherworldly beauty. The Snow Queen herself sat upon a throne of ice, her presence commanding respect and awe. Mrs. Claus approached the Snow Queen with warmth and sincerity, extending a hand in friendship. "I understand that you have been troubled, and I've come to listen to your concerns and see if there is a way we can find a solution that brings harmony to the North Pole." The Snow Queen, though initially aloof, was taken aback by Mrs. Claus's kindness and sincerity. She had expected confrontation, not empathy. She began to share her grievances, the encroachment of the outside world, the pollution, and the disregard for the beauty of the North Pole. Mrs. Claus listened with an open heart and responded with understanding. "I share your love for this land, and I, too, want to protect its beauty. But there is a way we can do it without resorting to blizzards and chaos. Let us work together to find a solution that ensures the North Pole remains a sanctuary of enchantment." The Snow Queen, touched by Mrs. Claus's words and her genuine willingness to find common ground, agreed to consider an alternative approach. Mrs. Claus suggested that they collaborate to spread awareness about environmental preservation, ensuring that the beauty of the North Pole was safeguarded for generations to come. With the Snow Queen's cooperation, they initiated a campaign to inspire change and respect for the North Pole's delicate ecosystem. They encouraged the world to reduce pollution and take steps to protect the environment. The Snow Queen, with her ability to create magical ice sculptures, created stunning displays that highlighted the beauty of the North Pole, captivating the hearts of people around the world. As the message of environmental conservation spread, the blizzard began to calm, and the North Pole returned to a state of tranquility. The Christmas preparations resumed with renewed vigor, and the world outside embraced the call to protect the magical realm of the North Pole. Mrs. Claus had achieved the seemingly impossible, bringing peace to the North Pole and convincing the Snow Queen to change her ways. It was a testament to her kindness, bravery, and clever thinking, demonstrating that even the most formidable challenges could be overcome with empathy and understanding. As Christmas Eve continued, Mrs. Claus returned to the North Pole with a sense of accomplishment, knowing that her heroic journey had not only strengthened the North Pole's magic, but had also brought about a positive change in the world. She had faced her greatest challenge with courage and compassion, proving that the spirit of Christmas could unite even the most unlikely of allies for the greater good. Chapter 6. Lessons from the Heart. Subchapter 1. The True Meaning of Christmas. As the days passed and the North Pole once again bustled with holiday activities, Mrs. Claus found herself in moments of quiet reflection. Her heroic journey had brought her face to face with countless challenges and adventures, but it had also brought profound lessons that touched the very core of her being. In the peaceful solitude of her cozy cottage, Mrs. Claus began to leaf through her diaries, each filled with stories of her experiences and encounters. The tales of the elves, the gift gnomes, the Snow Queen, and the children she had come to know all spoke of the magic of Christmas in their own unique ways. She realized that the true meaning of Christmas was not solely about the enchanting tales, the twinkling lights, or the gift-giving, but it was the essence of those experiences. It was the acts of kindness and empathy she had witnessed, the spirit of togetherness that bound the North Pole, and the belief in the magic of the holiday season that was the real magic of Christmas. The elves, tirelessly crafting toys and spreading cheer, reminded her that the spirit of giving and hard work were at the heart of the holiday. The gift gnomes, with their handmade presents and pure intentions, taught her that it was the thought and love behind a gift that truly mattered. Timmy's story of redemption had shown her the power of second chances and the capacity for change in every heart. Confronting the Snow Queen and convincing her to protect the North Pole through unity and awareness had emphasized that the true magic of Christmas extended beyond the boundaries of the North Pole and reached out to the world, promoting a message of harmony and preservation. As Mrs. Claus continued to reflect, she realized that the real magic of Christmas was in the collective goodness, the boundless love, and the timeless traditions that brought people together during the holiday season. It was in the laughter and joy of children, the warmth of family gatherings, and the shared spirit of hope and belief. Mrs. Claus understood that she, too, was an integral part of this magic. Her role as the keeper of Christmas traditions, the manager of the North Pole, and the loving companion to Santa was a testament to the values of kindness, empathy, and the importance of spreading joy. With a smile on her face and a heart full of gratitude, Mrs. Claus knew that her diaries were not just a record of her adventures, but a chronicle of the lessons she had learned. Christmas was not just a day. It was a state of mind, a way of living, and a celebration of the goodness that resided in every heart. The true meaning of Christmas was the embodiment of love, compassion, and the belief in the possibility of making the world a better place, not just during the holiday season, but throughout the entire year. Mrs. Claus's heart was filled with contentment as she looked out of her cottage window at the twinkling lights and the snowy landscape of the North Pole. The lessons from her heroic journey had reaffirmed her belief in the magic of Christmas and the enduring power of love and togetherness. Subchapter 2: The Power of Kindness. As Mrs. Claus continued to reflect on the true meaning of Christmas, she realized that one of the most remarkable aspects of the holiday was the power of kindness. The stories of children she had encountered during her adventures exemplified the extraordinary impact that small acts of goodwill could have on others. Mrs. Claus, with a warm cup of cocoa in hand, sat down to share these heartwarming stories, each a testament to the incredible power of kindness. 1. Lily's warmth. Mrs. Claus began with the story of Lily, the young girl she had mentioned during her meeting with the elves. Lily's family had fallen on hard times, and they couldn't afford to buy her Christmas presents. Despite the lack of material gifts, Lily had embraced the true spirit of Christmas. She volunteered at a local shelter, helping to serve meals to the homeless and sharing her warmth and kindness with everyone she met. Her generosity and empathy had not only warmed the hearts of those she helped, but also inspired her family to join in the spirit of giving. 2. Ethan's friendship. Mrs. Claus then shared the story of Ethan, a boy who had noticed a classmate sitting alone at lunchtime. The classmate had been new to the school and struggling to make friends. Rather than ignoring the situation, Ethan had approached the classmate, struck up a conversation, and invited him to join his group of friends. This small act of kindness had transformed the classmate's experience, and he felt accepted and valued, thanks to Ethan's compassion. 3. Sophie's snowman surprise. Another heartwarming tale was that of Sophie, a young girl who lived in a neighborhood filled with elderly residents. One winter, Sophie took it upon herself to build a snowman for each of her elderly neighbors, knowing that many of them couldn't do it themselves. She spent hours crafting unique snowmen, each with a personalized touch, and delivered them with a note of kindness. Her thoughtfulness not only brought smiles to the faces of her neighbors, but also sparked a sense of community and togetherness in the neighborhood. 4. Josh's food drive. Mrs. Claus also shared Josh's story, a boy who had organized a food drive in his community during the holiday season. He had seen families in need and decided to take action. Josh, with the help of his family and friends, collected non-perishable food items and delivered them to a local food bank. His efforts had provided nourishment and comfort to those who were struggling, reminding everyone of the importance of reaching out to help others. These stories, filled with the spirit of Christmas, illustrated that kindness had the power to change lives, bring joy to those in need, and create a sense of unity within communities. Mrs. Claus believed that the small acts of goodwill demonstrated by these children were the embodiment of the true magic of Christmas. She couldn't help but smile as she thought about the countless acts of kindness that occurred every holiday season. Each act, no matter how small, contributed to the greater good and reinforced the belief that the world could be a better place through empathy, compassion, and love. Mrs. Claus hoped that these stories of kindness would serve as a reminder to all who read her diaries that the true meaning of Christmas was not just about festivities and gifts, but about the power of kindness to transform the world, one small act at a time. Subchapter 3: Friends of the North Pole. Mrs. Claus had embarked on many adventures during her time at the North Pole, and along the way, she had forged extraordinary friendships with the unique inhabitants of this enchanted land. As she sat by the cozy fireplace in her cottage, she celebrated these heartwarming connections and pondered the profound lessons they held. Diversity had been a cornerstone of the North Pole's community, and it was reflected in the friendships Mrs. Claus had cultivated. She reflected on the bonds she had formed with the elves, the gift gnomes, the mystical creatures of the enchanted forest, and even the enigmatic Snow Queen. Each friendship had enriched her life and emphasized the importance of diversity, acceptance, and understanding in building a harmonious community. 1. Elves' dedication. Mrs. Claus thought of the elves with their cheerful disposition and unwavering dedication to their craft. Their friendship had taught her the value of hard work and the joy that came from shared endeavors. The diversity among the elves, each bringing their unique skills and perspectives to the workshop, had strengthened their community and fueled their creativity. 2. Gift Gnome's generosity. Her friendship with the gift gnomes was a testament to the significance of giving from the heart. These small, vibrant creatures had welcomed her with open arms and shown her that the act of giving was a gesture of love, irrespective of one's size or capabilities. Their presence emphasized that diversity could be a source of collective strength. 3. Enchanted Forest wisdom. Mrs. Claus had formed bonds with the wise old owl, the talking reindeer, and many other mystical creatures of the enchanted forest. Their wisdom had illuminated the importance of embracing different perspectives and nurturing the environment. Their unique qualities and insights had enriched the North Pole's cultural tapestry. 4. The Snow Queen's transformation. Perhaps the most striking example of the power of friendship was her connection with the Snow Queen. Mrs. Claus had confronted the Snow Queen, convinced her to change her ways, and had demonstrated that unity and understanding could overcome even the most formidable of barriers. Their friendship stood as a testament to the transformative potential of empathy and compassion. These friendships had collectively shown Mrs. Claus that diversity was not a hindrance, but a source of strength, and that understanding and acceptance were the foundations of a harmonious community. The North Pole was a microcosm of the wider world, where people from various backgrounds and with diverse abilities could come together, united by a shared sense of purpose and goodwill. In a world that sometimes emphasized differences, Mrs. Claus's friendships at the North Pole were a reminder of the importance of cherishing and celebrating diversity. They underscored the truth that acceptance and understanding were the bridges that connected people and created a stronger, more harmonious world. As she concluded her reflection, Mrs. Claus was filled with gratitude for the friendships she had cultivated. They had deepened her appreciation for the magic of the North Pole and had illuminated the profound lessons of inclusivity, acceptance, and the strength that came from embracing the unique qualities of all. It was a lesson she hoped to share with the world through her diaries, as a reminder that in unity and understanding, the spirit of Christmas could flourish in every heart. Chapter 7. Return of Santa Claus. Subchapter 1. Santa's Worldwide Adventure. As the magical events of that Christmas Eve continued, Mrs. Claus found herself filled with anticipation and excitement. The North Pole was abuzz with activity, as the elves prepared the final batch of toys, and the North Pole's enchantment was at its peak. With Santa Claus back and about to embark on the last trip for his worldwide adventure for that Christmas Eve, Mrs. Claus was ready to play her part as the supportive partner who watched over the North Pole. She knew that Santa's journey around the world was a monumental task, one that brought joy to millions of children, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder. Especially now with her invention of a new toy-making machine that produced more than they have ever done before, and Santa's effort to go several trips to ensure children all over the world received a gift. To accompany her beloved husband on his extraordinary voyage, Mrs. Claus made her way to the Snow Globe Observatory. This unique place allowed her to observe Santa's journey in real time, as the snow globe's magical properties provided a window into the lives of children all over the world. As she gazed into the snow globe, Mrs. Claus was transported to far-flung destinations, witnessing the heartwarming stories of the gifts Santa delivered and the sheer joy he brought to children of all backgrounds, cultures, and circumstances. 1. Luis's dream come true. Mrs. Claus's journey began in a small village in South America, where she saw Santa delivering a soccer ball to a young boy named Luis. Luis's face lit up with joy as he held the gift in his hands, realizing that his dream of having a soccer ball had come true. The gift was not just a toy. It was a symbol of hope and the fulfillment of a young boy's aspirations. 2. Amira's spark of creativity. In a bustling city in the Middle East, Mrs. Claus watched as Santa left a beautifully wrapped box for Amira, a young girl with a passion for art. Inside the box was a set of vibrant paints and canvases. The gift ignited Amira's creative spark, inspiring her to paint the world she imagined. And in doing so, she shared her unique perspective with the world. 3. Nina's caring heart. On an island in the Pacific, Mrs. Claus witnessed Santa's visit to a girl named Nina, who had always dreamt of helping animals. Santa delivered a collection of books about wildlife conservation and an invitation to a local animal shelter. Nina's eyes shone with the realization that she could make a difference and follow her heart's calling to protect animals in need. 4. Yuki's message of unity. In a small village in Japan, Santa left a gift for a girl named Yuki. Inside the beautifully wrapped package was a globe, symbolizing the unity of all people across the world. Yuki felt a profound sense of connection and belonging, inspired to promote peace and harmony within her community. As Mrs. Claus continued to observe Santa's journey, she was filled with a profound sense of gratitude for the role she played in supporting his mission. The stories of children from all corners of the world reaffirmed the universality of the holiday spirit, transcending borders, languages, and cultures. The worldwide adventure was a testament to the power of Christmas to touch hearts and inspire kindness, generosity, and hope. It was a reminder that, no matter where they lived, children shared the common dream of a visit from Santa Claus. And in his journey, he brought the magic of Christmas to every child's doorstep. Mrs. Claus watched as Santa moved from one destination to another, bringing smiles and creating unforgettable moments for children and families. The Snow Globe Observatory allowed her to share in the joy and wonder of the holiday season and reaffirmed her belief in the enduring magic of Christmas. As she continued to watch Santa's worldwide adventure, Mrs. Claus couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and love for the man who had dedicated his life to spreading joy and making Christmas dreams come true for children across the globe. Santa Claus was not just a legend. He was the embodiment of the spirit of Christmas itself. Subchapter 2. Reuniting at the North Pole. The North Pole was abuzz with anticipation as the time for Santa's final return drew near. Mrs. Claus stood at the Snow Globe Observatory, watching as Santa completed his worldwide journey, delivering gifts and spreading joy to children all over the globe. As the sleigh touched down on the snow-covered runway, a wave of excitement swept through the North Pole. The reindeer landed gracefully, and Santa, with his iconic red suit and merry smile, disembarked, greeted by cheers and applause from the elves and the North Pole's unique inhabitants. Mrs. Claus rushed to Santa's side, her eyes filled with love and relief. She hugged him tightly, savoring the warmth and comfort of his presence. The joy of their reunion was shared by everyone at the North Pole, and the atmosphere was filled with a sense of accomplishment and unity. Mrs. Claus's friends from her adventures, the elves, the gift gnomes, the mystical creatures of the enchanted forest, and even the once mysterious Snow Queen, gathered to celebrate their successful Christmas preparations and Santa's safe return. This diverse group of individuals had come together, each contributing their unique skills and perspectives, and had demonstrated that challenges could be overcome when people work together. 1. The elves' festive spirit. The elves, known for their dedication and unwavering commitment to toy production, had outdone themselves this year. Their meticulous craftsmanship and tireless efforts had resulted in a treasure trove of gifts. Their spirits were high, and they celebrated their success with a lively dance, spreading their infectious festive spirit to everyone. 2. The gift gnomes' handmade delights. The gift gnomes, with their knack for creating personalized gifts, had contributed a touch of magic to the holiday season. Their handcrafted presents had made Christmas special for children all over the world. They joined in the celebration, sharing stories of the smiles they had witnessed when their gifts were received. 3. Mystical creatures' wisdom. The mystical creatures from the enchanted forest and the Snow Queen had added their unique wisdom and magic to the North Pole's preparations. They spoke of the importance of unity and understanding, emphasizing that the North Pole's diversity was its greatest strength. 4. The Snow Queen's transformation. The Snow Queen, who had once been a source of wintry challenges, had transformed into a symbol of cooperation and environmental awareness. Her presence at the celebration was a testament to the power of change and the impact of empathy. As the celebrations continued, Mrs. Claus couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride and gratitude for the friends she had made during her adventures. They had not only overcome challenges but had also shared in the joy and spirit of Christmas, each in their own unique way. The North Pole had once again demonstrated that when people from different backgrounds, cultures, and abilities came together with a shared purpose and goodwill, they could achieve great things. The lesson was clear. The strength of unity and collaboration was the true magic of the holiday season. As the night grew darker, the northern lights illuminated the sky, casting a mesmerizing glow over the North Pole. The music, laughter, and stories of their adventures echoed in the crisp winter air, reaffirming that Christmas was a time of togetherness and celebration, and the North Pole was a shining example of that spirit. The return of Santa Claus was not just a homecoming, but a symbol of the enduring magic and resilience of the North Pole. Mrs. Claus, Santa, and their friends celebrated not only the success of another magical Christmas, but also the power of love, friendship, and the shared values that made their community and the world a better place. Subchapter 3: A Heartwarming Christmas Celebration. The North Pole was aglow with festive lights and the sound of joyous carolers as the grand Christmas celebration began. The air was filled with the aroma of freshly baked cookies and the warm embrace of holiday cheer. It was a time for Mrs. Claus, Santa, and their friends to come together and share the joy of the holiday season. The celebration was a true spectacle, with every corner of the North Pole adorned in twinkling lights, wreaths, and decorations. The elves, with their jolly disposition, had transformed the entire place into a winter wonderland. A massive Christmas tree stood tall in the center, glistening with ornaments and lights, and the scent of fresh pine filled the air. Mrs. Claus, in her festive attire, stood alongside Santa, their hands held together as they welcomed their friends and the entire North Pole community to the celebration. It was a heartwarming reminder that the true magic of Christmas was in love, unity, and giving. The festivities were filled with heartwarming moments. 1. The Elves' Festive Parade. The elves paraded through the North Pole, playing cheerful music and showcasing their creativity with colorful floats. They danced and sang, sharing their enthusiasm and festive spirit with everyone. 2. The Gift Gnomes' Handmade Gifts. The Gift Gnomes had prepared a special exhibition of their handcrafted gifts. The room was filled with exquisite presents, each reflecting the unique personality and interests of the recipient. It was a testament to the thought and love that went into gift giving. 3. Mystical Creatures' Enchanted Performances. The mystical creatures from the Enchanted Forest and the Snow Queen contributed their magic to the celebration. They performed breathtaking displays of light and snow, mesmerizing the audience and reinforcing the importance of cooperation and environmental awareness. 4. Unity in Diversity. The North Pole's unique inhabitants mingled with one another, sharing stories and laughter and breaking down barriers. It was a beautiful illustration of the unity and diversity that had made their community strong. 5. Santa Stories. Santa Claus regaled the crowd with stories of his worldwide adventure, recounting the joy he had brought to children everywhere. His tales were a reminder that the holiday spirit transcended borders and that love and kindness were universal languages. As the night progressed, Mrs. Claus took the stage to share her own reflections on the season. She emphasized that while the gifts were delightful, the true magic of Christmas was in the love they shared, the unity they celebrated, and the joy they brought to one another. The North Pole's grand celebration was a heartwarming reminder that the holiday season was not just about decorations and presents, but about the connections, friendships, and shared values that made the North Pole a place of wonder and enchantment. As the festivities continued and the northern lights painted the night sky with vivid colors, Mrs. Claus, Santa, and their friends held hands and sang a chorus of Christmas carols. It was a moment that captured the true essence of the season, a celebration of love, unity, and giving. The North Pole's Christmas celebration was a testament to the enduring magic of the holiday season and the power of love and togetherness to brighten the darkest of winter nights. As the night drew to a close, Mrs. Claus couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment, knowing that the spirit of Christmas would continue to shine brightly, not just in the North Pole, but in the hearts of people all over the world. Chapter 8. The Gift of Family. Subchapter 1. A special surprise for Mrs. Claus. As the grand Christmas celebration at the North Pole wound down, there was a sense of contentment in the air. The festivities had been a resounding success, filled with joy, love, and unity. It was a time for reflection and appreciation, and the residents of the North Pole, including the elves, reindeer, and Mrs. Claus's newfound friends, had something special in mind. They had all witnessed Mrs. Claus's incredible journey, her leadership in Santa's absence, her friendships with unique inhabitants, and her unwavering support for the North Pole. They wanted to express their gratitude and admiration for her in a meaningful way. In the days leading up to this surprise, the North Pole community had come together to prepare something heartwarming and deeply touching for Mrs. Claus. The elves, known for their craftsmanship, had created a handcrafted book, Mrs. Claus's Chronicles, a journey of love and magic. This book was filled with illustrations and stories, capturing the remarkable adventures and heartwarming moments she had experienced throughout the year. The reindeer, including her favorite, Rudolph, had penned personal notes of appreciation, expressing their gratitude for her unwavering support and her role in ensuring their readiness for the Christmas journey. Their words were heartfelt and genuine, reflecting the deep bond they shared. Her newfound friends from her adventures, the gift gnomes, the mystical creatures of the enchanted forest, and the transformed Snow Queen, had each contributed something unique. The gift gnomes had created a personalized gift for Mrs. Claus, an enchanting snow globe with a miniature version of the North Pole, capturing the magic of their home. The mystical creatures had performed a special light show, a symbol of unity and harmony, while the Snow Queen had added her own touch of frosty magic to the gift. As the North Pole residents gathered one evening, Mrs. Claus was invited to a beautifully decorated room. There, she found herself surrounded by the elves, the reindeer, and her newfound friends, all wearing warm smiles and expressions of deep gratitude. Mrs. Claus was presented with a handcrafted book, and as she turned the pages, she was moved to tears. The stories and illustrations captured the essence of her journey and the love and unity that had defined her year. The reindeer's notes touched her heart, reminding her of the special bond she shared with each of them. The snow globe from the gift gnomes was a breathtaking work of art, and as Mrs. Claus gazed into it, she could see the enchanting world of the North Pole come to life in miniature. The mystical creatures performed a mesmerizing light show, and the Snow Queen's presence filled the room with a sense of wonder and transformation. Mrs. Claus was deeply moved by this surprise. She felt a profound sense of gratitude and love for the North Pole community, her family. The gift was not just a token of appreciation. It was a symbol of the bonds they had forged, the challenges they had overcome, and the love that bound them all together. As the evening continued, Mrs. Claus, Santa, and their friends gathered around the fireplace. They shared stories, laughter, and the warmth of their connections, reminding one another that they were not just a community. They were a family. The true gift of the season was the love and unity they shared, and it was a gift that would last throughout the year and for many more Christmases to come. The surprise for Mrs. Claus was a poignant reminder that in the heart of the North Pole, the greatest gift of all was the gift of family. And in that moment, surrounded by her loved ones, Mrs. Claus felt the fullness of the holiday spirit in her heart. Subchapter 2. The Spirit of Togetherness. As the North Pole celebration continued, Mrs. Claus took a moment to reflect on the profound importance of family and the sense of togetherness that defined the holiday season. In the heart of the North Pole, surrounded by her loved ones, she was reminded of the bonds that made Christmas truly special. Mrs. Claus gathered her friends around a warm, crackling fire in her cozy cottage. The room was filled with the glow of Christmas lights and the comforting scent of freshly baked cookies. She shared stories of families around the world, emphasizing that Christmas was a time for loved ones to come together and create lasting memories. 1. The Smith family's Christmas tradition. Mrs. Claus recounted the story of the Smith family, who lived in a small town in the United States. Each year, they had a special Christmas tradition where they would bake gingerbread cookies together. The children, parents, and even the grandparents would gather in the kitchen, laughing and reminiscing as they rolled out the dough, cut out shapes, and decorated the cookies with colorful icing. It was a time of joy and bonding that spanned generations. 2. The Ahmed's multicultural celebration. In a bustling city in India, Mrs. Claus shared the tale of the Ahmed family, who celebrated Christmas alongside other cultural festivals. Their home was adorned with Christmas decorations and the vibrant colors of Diwali. The family celebrated with neighbors and friends from various backgrounds, sharing delicious meals and exchanging stories of their respective traditions. It was a celebration of unity in diversity, a testament to the power of bringing people together. 3. The Garcia family's neighborhood caroling. In a tight-knit community in Mexico, the Garcia family and their neighbors came together for a cherished tradition. They would go caroling, walking through the snowless streets, singing carols, and bringing joy to each doorstep. The spirit of togetherness was not just within the family, but extended to the entire neighborhood, creating a sense of warmth and unity. 4. The Kim family's acts of kindness. Mrs. Claus told of the Kim family in South Korea, who practiced acts of kindness during the holiday season. They would volunteer at local shelters, deliver food to those in need, and write heartfelt letters to express their gratitude and love to one another. The focus was not on material gifts, but on the gifts of compassion and togetherness. As Mrs. Claus shared these stories, her friends listened with rapt attention, understanding that the holiday season was a time when people around the world opened their hearts to family, friends, and neighbors. It was a time to strengthen bonds, show gratitude, and create lasting memories. The North Pole, with its diverse and unique inhabitants, embodied the spirit of togetherness. Mrs. Claus emphasized that they were not just a community, but a family. They had faced challenges and celebrated successes together, and their bonds had only grown stronger. As the night deepened, Mrs. Claus and her friends continued to share stories, laughter, and love. They played games, sang carols, and exchanged heartfelt gifts, creating their own cherished memories of togetherness. The room was filled with the warmth of connection and the knowledge that the true gift of the holiday season was the gift of family and the spirit of togetherness. In the North Pole, surrounded by the enchantment of Christmas, Mrs. Claus and her friends reveled in the beauty of their shared bonds. As the snowflakes fell gently outside, they cherished the moments that defined the season, the moments of love, unity, and togetherness that made every Christmas truly magical. Subchapter 3. Farewell until next year. As the day at the North Pole drew to a close, the warmth of the festive celebration lingered in the air. The room was bathed in the soft, golden glow of the fireplace, casting a comforting ambience over the gathering of friends and family. Mrs. Claus and Santa, seated side by side, shared a tender moment. They had been through a remarkable year, facing challenges and spreading joy to children around the world. Now, as they reflected on their journey, their gratitude for each other and their shared mission was palpable. Mrs. Claus reached for Santa's hand, her eyes filled with love and appreciation. "Santa, my love," she began, her voice soft but resolute, "this year has been a remarkable journey. We faced trials and triumphs together, and I couldn't be prouder of the work we've done." Santa nodded, his eyes twinkling with admiration for his beloved partner. "My dear, you've been the heart and soul of the North Pole. Your leadership, your friendships, and your unwavering support have made all the difference. I couldn't do this without you." They embraced, feeling the warmth of their connection, the bond that had held them together for centuries. The love they shared was not just romantic. It was a deep partnership, a shared commitment to making the world a better place, one Christmas at a time. The North Pole residents, gathered around them, could feel the love and appreciation that radiated between the Claus couple. It was a reminder that the magic of Christmas was not just in the toys or the decorations. It was in the love, unity, and partnership that made it all possible. As the night grew late and the North Pole residents bid farewell, Mrs. Claus and Santa knew that their work was never truly done. The spirit of Christmas lived on, not bound by time or place, but by the love shared by those who celebrated it. It would continue to shine brightly until the next year, when they would once again come together to spread joy and love to children everywhere. The Claus couple watched as their friends and family departed, each knowing that they were part of something special, a community that celebrated the true meaning of the holiday season. In their hearts, they carried the spirit of Christmas, the gift of family, and the love and togetherness that made the North Pole a place of enchantment. As the door closed behind the last of their guests, Mrs. Claus and Santa returned to the warmth of their cottage. The fire crackled, casting a cozy glow, and they settled into their favorite armchairs, content in the knowledge that their love and partnership were the true magic of Christmas. The North Pole lay silent, bathed in the gentle light of the northern lights, a testament to the enduring spirit of the holiday season. Mrs. Claus and Santa, hand in hand, looked forward to the adventures and challenges that the next year would bring, knowing that their love would guide them through it all. And so, the North Pole slept, but the magic of Christmas remained, living on in the hearts of those who celebrated it, and in the love shared by Mrs. Claus and Santa Claus, the couple who had dedicated their lives to bringing happiness to children everywhere.